Support for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere comes from MX Publishing, with the largest catalog of new Sherlock Holmes books in the world. New novels, biographies, graphic novels, and short story collections about Sherlock Holmes. Find them at mxpublishing.com.
And by the Wessex Press, the premier publisher of books about Sherlock Holmes and his world. Find them online at wessexpress.com.
And from listeners like you who support us through Patreon. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/I Hear of Sherlock. I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 237, a celebration of Sherlock Holmes.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became a chronicler.
In a world where it's always 1895, comes I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we discuss goings-on in the world of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts, the Baker Street irregulars, and popular culture related to the great detective.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Burt Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
Hello and welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, are you ready to celebrate today?
I am in deep and profound and vast need of an opportunity to celebrate, and I am ready to go.
Excellent. Well, we will be quite celebratory in our nature here today. We are going to be launching into an interview with Paul Booth from a celebration of Sherlock Holmes, a conference coming up at DePaul University on May 7th, 2022. So stay tuned for that. A little bit of housekeeping here before we do that, and that is, if you would like the show notes for this episode, and you will because there's links that you will need to check out, it is available at IHOSE.co/IHOSE237. That's all lowercase. That'll take you directly to the iHearofSherlock.com website. There you'll have all the links that I did mention, as well as ways to get in touch with us on all of our social networks where we are I Hear of Sherlock. You can email us at comment@ihearofsherlock.com. Keep that email address handy because it's going to come into use later on in the show when we have our Canonical Couplet quiz. That's where we give you 2 lines of poetry, and we give you a chance to win a prize from the IHOSE vaults here. We have all kinds of treasures, past and present, of Sherlock Holmes. And you can also become a patron simply by hitting that orange Become a Patron button. That'll take you to Patreon. If you'd like to go directly there, it's patreon.com/IHearofSherlock. And all of our patrons will be able to listen to additional clips and see additional material as we have it available. And in fact, there will be a bonus audio clip for our patrons. So if you would like to be part of that community there, please become a patron. We thank you for your support, and we look forward to welcoming you to the I Hear of Sherlock community. Paul Booth is a professor of media and cinema studies in the College of Communication at DePaul University. Received his PhD in communication and rhetoric from RPI, and he researches fandom, games, technology, popular culture, and cultural studies. He teaches classes in media studies, television narrative, convergence, and digital media, board games, popular culture, new media, communication technology, and participatory cultures. He also happens to be the organizer of the annual DePaul Pop Culture Conference, where fans and scholars come together in thoughtful discussion of popular culture texts. Past conference topics have included a wide variety of topics, which we will discuss with Paul in just a moment. And, of course, the 2022 conference is focused on who else? Sherlock Holmes. And according to Paul's bio, he's currently enjoying a cup of coffee. Paul, is that true?
It is, in fact, a lie, because at the moment I'm enjoying a cup of tea. But I had a cup of coffee an hour ago, so I'm going to say that it's still true.
An hour ago, back when we first connected and tried to get all the technical glitches worked out. That's good.
I had time to boil the kettle.
That's great. Well, why don't we start out with how you first became acquainted with this character known as Sherlock Holmes?
Oh, gosh, what a question. I don't know if there's ever been a time I haven't been acquainted with Sherlock Holmes. I have very strong memories of being a kid and watching the old Sherlock Holmes movies on like television back like on a rainy Sunday, or if I was homesick from school, and just fell in love with the character. And I mean, it wasn't until later that I kind of read the stories myself, and started kind of researching and learning more about Sherlock Holmes. But I must have been 7 or 8 the first time that I kind of saw Jeremy Brett, and it just like was an amazing experience.
That's fantastic. And, it's interesting because so many people have this convergence of kind of a textual introduction to Sherlock Holmes at the same time that they see him portrayed on some screen, because as the name of the show goes, we do hear of Sherlock everywhere. So there becomes this mixture in the mind. And that seems to be consistent with the types of things that you teach, as we went over in your bio there. It's really this convergence of so many things. Can you talk a little bit about what you've witnessed in your professional career with respect to pop culture and different media and the convergence of some of these great concepts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way of bringing together a lot of the things that I've been interested in kind of since I got my PhD, since I really started doing media studies research. You're right, a lot of the things that I tend to research, and a lot of things that have been the topic of the Pop Culture Conference are central to convergence and convergence culture. Sherlock Holmes existed as stories for a long time, but I think in popular culture, there are many more people who will have seen the recent BBC adaptation, or will have seen the Robert Downey Jr. movies. Even if you look at something like Star Trek, right, which was a TV show and then movies and novels and stories and comics, nothing that is kind of immensely culturally significant exists in just one medium. And I think it's because people that are fans of these massive texts or these characters or these cultural touchstones want to experience it in new ways and want to experience these texts across all of the different forms that they can take. What is Sherlock Holmes in a comic book, and how is that different than Sherlock Holmes on screen or on the page? And I think it doesn't so much change the character as it gives us, as readers, kind of more nuance, more maybe 360 view of these texts, these characters, these culturally significant icons. So, the idea of convergence is that all of these different media forms come together when we're imagining what the object of our devotion, the object of our fandom, the object of our enthusiasm. When we imagine what that is, we don't just pull from one source. We pull from all of these sources from around us, some of which are professionally made and some of which are fan-made. It would not surprise me to learn that a lot of Sherlock Holmes fans have an idea of the character from fan fiction or fan-made movies. That is how a lot of people find their loves in the media today.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. And the thing with this multimedia approach to, let's say, Sherlock Holmes in particular, we haven't. Well, let me put it this way: we are in the midst of a great renaissance, and not only of Sherlock Holmes, but just in terms of the different platforms by which we have to consume Sherlock Holmes content. However, you go back to when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was still living. Well, you had Sherlock Holmes on stage. You had Sherlock Holmes in one of the earliest films by Thomas Edison in 1901. You had Sherlock Holmes on the radio. Right, so even during Conan Doyle's time, Sherlock Holmes was a multimedia attraction. Do you think that with so many different methods now, so many different platforms, that enhances or dilutes the character?
Oh, I think it enhances the character without a doubt. But I am also a person, much to my students' chagrin or my students' anger, depending on your point of view, who embraces contradiction. I love the wrinkles and the things where one text contradicts another text, because I find that is where it's really fun to debate and discuss and dive into a character. So whereas I think there are some people who would say, oh, in one medium, in the movies, Sherlock Holmes is portrayed in this way, but in the text, in the original, he is a very different character. And I fully understand, people, fans not liking that or wanting there to be consistency. But for me personally, I find those inconsistencies to be the most fun, because that's where I can sit down with another fan and just have an endless conversation about, well, what if this is the case, or what if that was the case? So for me, it makes a much more interesting character and a much more well-rounded character, because human beings are contradictory, and human beings have different perspectives and change over time. And I think if you have a character that's 140 years old, and it hasn't changed at all, that's just boring.
I think you're absolutely right. It's interesting because there's a lot going on in what you just said. I mean, on the one hand, humans are very imitative. And so there have always been aspects of Holmes's character that people have said, hey, maybe next time I go up the stairs, I should count and see how many there are. And maybe the next time I walk down the street, I should see if I could see mud on someone's shoes. And there's that aspect too. But the other thing is that by doing what you suggest, in addition to having great, interesting conversations, you can begin to chart the evolution of culture and character, because the way the characters are presented is probably, just very representative of the way characters and personalities are generally being presented in different media at the time.
That's a really great point. And, it's something, I teach a class, not about Sherlock Holmes, it's about Doctor Who, but we look at Doctor Who from its beginnings in 1963 all the way up to the present day. And in that 58 years, what we talk about is how the character changes to keep up with whatever the culture is at the time. And I think the same can be true of any long-lasting text. James Bond has changed in nearly 60 years, and Sherlock Holmes has changed, and it helps us understand the larger cultural changes that have happened and that shape us as well.
Oh yeah, boy, and I love the Doctor Who aspect to this. Like many people who are interested in Sherlock Holmes, I'm also a fan of Doctor Who, and you can really see that evolution that you talk about when you think about the difference over the years, the campy Pertwee years and the original premise of Doctor Who, which I think was sort of sold on the idea of, it's going to be different historical things. That's it. It'll be moments of history, and that'll be really interesting. And it's really fascinating to see that sort of evolution roll out in a character in a production over decades.
Now, let me ask you this, Paul, because, with James Bond, with Doctor Who, they kind of move with the time. We had James Bond as a Cold War hero, and now we're well beyond the Cold War. And, he's looking at things that have to do with cybercrime and, modern challenges. And when it comes to Sherlock Holmes, he's often portrayed in his element, in Victorian and Edwardian England. Do you see any changes to characteristics or attitudes within that time frame that are still reflective of what we're dealing with today?
Absolutely. And I think, the obvious answer to that is the BBC Sherlock show, which has updated Sherlock Holmes and put him in the present day. But then, even if you look at the Guy Ritchie movies that came out, 10, 15 years ago now, which were taking place in Victorian London, the portrayal of Holmes and Watson in those movies, to me, reads extremely modern. Just the way that they interacted, the way they spoke, it felt like a contemporary take on the character, even though they were in this historical setting. But at the same time, I think I think you're right that there is with Holmes in particular, there's a love of Victoriana and the kind of older British culture that comes with it. I think that more so than James Bond and more so than the Doctor or other characters, Holmes is a creature of his environment, and so the portrayal, while I think it does update and I think it does change over time, I think it does, with Holmes in particular, needs to have a kind of consistency of the era to make it familiar, to make the character seem like the character that we love.
I think you're right, and it's interesting because you talk about contradictions. I think this is one of the reasons that Sherlock Holmes is still with us 140 years on, and will probably still be with us another 140 years on. We're able to kind of put that pin in him and his time, and yet still make it relevant for the things that we're grappling with today. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, listen to our sponsor, and when we come back, we'll be talking with Paul about the conference. Stay with us. MX Publishing recently launched the MX Audio Collection, an app with a series of interviews and other audio content, beginning with Lee Child talking about Reacher and Sherlock. There are many more interviews lined up for 2022, including Jeffrey Hatcher, screenwriter for Mr. Holmes, Otto Penzler, the founder of the Mysterious Bookshop and Mysterious Press, authors like Bonnie McBird and Nicholas Meyer, and yours truly, Scott Monty and Burt Wolder from I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Every month, MX will be adding in at least 4 new Sherlock Holmes stories and some more theater performances. There'll be more from the deductionist Ben Cardall, too. You can read more about the app and sign up for the MX Audio Collection at ihose.co/MXaudio. That's all lowercase, ihose.co/MXaudio. There's a monthly subscription option and an annual subscription option with a significant discount. And IHOSE listeners get an additional 25% off of any subscription you choose just by using the code IHOSE when checking out. A percentage of the proceeds of the app go to Undershaw, the School for Children with Learning Disabilities. It was the former home of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who of course wrote many of the Sherlock Holmes stories while he lived there. So go to ihose.co/mxaudio and use the code IHOSE today for the MX Audio Collection. Okay, we are back and we're talking with Paul Booth, who is with DePaul University, and he is putting on a conference on May 7th, 2022, called A Celebration of Sherlock Holmes. Now, this is part of a series of celebrations, of conferences. Paul, can you take us back kind of through the history of this pop culture conference, maybe how you developed it and how it rolled out?
Absolutely. This is the 9th conference, so I'm already kind of thinking of what we might be able to do for our big 10th anniversary next year. It started in 2013, and it actually started at the suggestion of a student who was in a class of mine, and 2013 for your listeners that know their Doctor Who know that it was the 50th anniversary of the show. And my students all know that I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. I mean, I wear a Doctor Who t-shirt every day. I have little action figures in my office. And one of them said, "Are you doing anything for the 50th anniversary?" And I said, "Well, I am going to watch some episodes and things." He's like, "No, are you doing something at DePaul? We would love to learn more about Doctor Who." And so I thought, that's such a brilliant idea. I'll invite, I know a bunch of people who research Doctor Who, so I'll invite them and we can have a little symposium. So the celebration of Doctor Who happened, and it was just such an amazing experience. And the students came and we had really thoughtful, intelligent conversations. They got a lot out of it. My colleagues got a lot out of it. And then, surprisingly, about 100 people from Chicago came. I think some folks let some clubs know, and they all kind of they came. And so I thought this was such a fabulous experience. Everyone got something out of it. I really enjoyed putting it on. I'll do it again. And so I didn't want to do Doctor Who. So the next year, I think I wouldn't do this now, given everything that we have learned. But it was a Joss Whedon themed one, a kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer themed conference. Yeah, it was 2014. A lot of stuff hadn't come out. I've since apologized for doing that theme as a conference, but again, we had about 200 people come to that conference. The year after, we did Supernatural, and the year after that, we did Star Trek, and then Harry Potter, and then we've done Disney, and then we did have to do a kind of pause during the COVID years, and then we did a virtual conference last year on superheroes. And then this year is of course Sherlock Holmes. So we really kind of run the gamut of different kinds of texts, different kinds of interests. I always have keynote speakers who work in the industry, academic speakers who study this stuff. But it's really the conference as a whole is really geared towards bringing fans and academics together. Because the thing that I kind of recognized when I did the first one, did the Doctor Who one, was, academics talk, when they study pop culture, we talk about these pop culture texts and analyze them in the same way that fans are. We just use a different language sometimes. And fans talk about and analyze their favorite texts just using different languages. So let's bring these people together. Let's have conversations that span more than just an academic conference or a fan convention. Let's put something together that brings people together. And so far, it's really been a success. People are excited. The academics love it because it's a little bit less formal. I think fans love it because It gives them an opportunity to talk about their favorite text in a kind of more analytical way than they're often used to. And then we get great community guests coming in, practitioners coming in. We have vendors come in, so I always get some community partners in, and it is exactly what it says, a celebration. People get together to talk about this thing that's been really influential in their lives. It's free. It's just one day, and it's just such an amazing event to put on, and I've met so many interesting people doing it.
So what have you planned for May and Sherlock Holmes?
Well, our kind of big keynote speakers for this conference, the academic speaker is a professor from DePaul University in Canada. His name is Dr. Tom Yui. And he's published a lot of work on Sherlock Holmes generally, but he's also kind of edited a book on Sherlock Holmes fandom that has been pretty popular. And I've met him before, and he's a really, really great speaker. But our big kind of professional keynote is Arwell Wynne-Jones, who was the production designer of BBC's Sherlock. So he worked on all 4 series of Sherlock with Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss. He also worked on Doctor Who, which is just a happy coincidence. And on Dracula on a number, he's worked a lot with Stephen Moffat. But he's flying over. He's going to talk to us about production design and kind of putting together the look of Sherlock. But we also have some other really interesting panels. There are 4 local crime authors who are doing a panel on writing crime, crafting the crime fiction novel. I have a private investigator doing a panel talking about like what's it like being a real life Sherlock Holmes. We're going to have screenings of some Sherlock Holmes media. And then, of course, there's panels of academics and fans kind of talking over things from adaptations of Sherlock Holmes, mental health and Sherlock Holmes, Holmes and Watson as characters, science and technology in the Sherlock Holmes universe, genre and history, sexuality, fandom, lots of really interesting topics. And that's just kind of scratching the surface. We've got about 30 speakers coming in, giving talks.
And this is all in one day?
It is. The panels are basically, there's going to be 2 panels concurrent. It goes from 10 in the morning until 5 in the evening. It is a packed day.
Wow. That's impressive. That is really impressive.
But that means that people have to choose, don't they? They can't.
That is sadly, yes. People do have to choose. I've tried not to put things in conflict with each other that maybe share an interest, but it is one of the kind of realities is that there's always going to be a little bit, unless I do a 2-day conference and then it suddenly people have to get a hotel room and it just becomes a little bit more of an ordeal for people. And I'm really wanting this to be a free event that you can just kind of come to and enjoy without having to stress too much about it. But I it's either that or I reject a lot of papers, and I don't like doing that either. So,
this is vexing because you're not that far away. I'm in Michigan, but unfortunately, I am taken that weekend. So I would dearly love to come and see this. So for Sherlockians who are in the Midwest or who are willing to travel, what do they need to do to ensure that they can attend this free event?
Absolutely. And I'm very sorry that you won't be able to attend, Scott, because I only learned after this had been scheduled that there were a number of other Sherlock-themed events going on that weekend. And unfortunately, I'm at the mercy of DePaul's schedule, as well as the schedule of my keynote guests. So it is what it is. But But for folks who are interested, our website is popcultureconference.com, and you can go there, find out more information. I will have the schedule up by next week. I'm just double checking with all the speakers to make sure I have all the information correct. And we have an Eventbrite that you can get to via that website, popcultureconference.com. And at the Eventbrite, you can register free tickets. We also have tickets for our charity. So every year, our keynote speaker picks a charity that they support, and we raise money for that charity. So you can donate on the Eventbrite as well. This year's charity, and I'm sadly going to mispronounce it because I'm not Welsh, but is a Welsh children's hospice, Tai Hafen, I think, is how it is pronounced. But you can donate to their to that cause on the Eventbrite as well.
Yeah, that's great. That is fantastic. And looking over the speakers, I should note that we've actually had a couple of them here on the show before, a number of times. Ashley Polasek, who was with us on episode 143 with Curtis Armstrong, who is one of the other speakers.
Yeah. I should have mentioned that, but I know Ashley from kind of academic circles, and invited her to speak. And then Curtis, I've never met before, but he just submitted a paper, and when he submitted, I said, "This is outstanding. I've been a fan of yours since I was young. I would love for you to come to the conference." So I'm extremely excited that both of them can make it.
Yeah, and well, he had to tie into one of your earlier topics too. He's a supernatural guy, right? He
is, and our keynote guest at that conference was one of the producers and writers, Robbie Thompson. And sadly, I didn't know that Curtis was so interested in doing these sorts of talks. I'll have him back as often as he wants to come.
Yeah, he is. He's an amazing scholar, as well as obviously a wonderful entertainment professional. Hey, maybe there's an idea. Maybe your 10th anniversary conference can be Revenge of the Nerds.
I think as a way to tie together everything we've done so far, that is very apt.
Well, I'll expect a free invitation then.
You've got it, Scott.
Well, it sounds like it's just going to be a heck of a lot of fun. And these things, as they always do, they result in even more conversations. They result in even more friendships, more professional associations with each other. I think it just sounds like a magic combination that you've got here, Paul.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited about it.
And when are we going to get you to come out to some of our Sherlockian events?
I would be happy to. Now that I've found your Facebook group, I'm happy to stay in touch and come out as much as you'd like. Michigan's not that far away.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to more interactions together. Paul Booth from DePaul University and the DePaul Pop Culture Conference, which this year is a celebration of Sherlock Holmes on May 7th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much.
There's so much more we could talk about with Paul Booth, and there's so much more we could say about this subject and what can be learned from looking at Sherlock Holmes in popular culture. I'm just sorry we didn't have the time, but maybe we'll have an opportunity, to have more of that sort of discussion with Paul and others in future, because it is, absolutely fascinating. And as we were sort of talking off mic with Paul, it doesn't necessarily have a clear beginning. You could be thinking about popular culture and Sherlock Holmes in the 1880s and the 1890s, and that's just a fascinating idea to me.
Yeah, I mean, Sherlock Holmes, he's been part of the popular culture landscape really since his very beginning. I mean, the very fact that people would send telegrams and letters to 221B Baker Street. I mean, that he was indelibly linked to the culture of the time, popular or not. So it's just fascinating the way that this has evolved over time, and, well, here's hoping will continue to evolve decades and decades into the future.
One of the great Sherlockian periodicals is back, the 2021 Sherlock Holmes Review, edited by Steve Doyle, art direction by Mark Gagan, with all new contributions from Nicholas Meyer, Robert Doherty, Frank Cho, Anne Margaret Lewis, Steve Hockensmith, Les Klinger, Jimmy Aiken, and more. 118 pages about Sherlock Holmes, the illustrators, community, collecting, comics, reviews, film and TV, scholarship, including new artwork, Irene Adler, drawn by the inimitable Frank Cho. It looks like a book and reads like a magazine. It's the Sherlock Holmes Review. Get your first edition copy of this essential 2021 Sherlockian Annual, the all-new Sherlock Holmes Review, at wesexpress.com.
Hey, Bert, you know what that means? Yes, that means it's time for everyone's favorite Sherlock Holmes quiz. It's Canonical Couplet, where we give you 2 lines of poetry, and you are supposed to identify which story we are talking about. Now, the last time we were around these parts, we gave you this clue. With masses of material, there's always something new. This case is reconstructed from the lion's point of view. Bert, do you know which Sherlock Holmes story we are talking about this time?
It sounds to me as if there's some doubt in your voice. I can't quite understand why that is.
Well, we're about to find out.
Yeah, of course I know what that is.
Okay.
That is an early failure, unfortunately, by Sherlock Holmes. It's a case that involved a beautiful American contralto, a strange diet. That's the case Watson called A Scandal in Bulimia.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Well, apologies to anyone of any good sense, really. But in this case, anyone who was looking for the actual answer of that. No, what we were, let's go to our friend Eric Deckers, because he's always got a great response for this. In this case, Eric said, despite my utter failure last time, which I plan to appeal, I remain optimistic of my chances this week. He says, I believe this is the case where Bert got a particularly nasty case of shingles and was overrun with a robust skin rash. It's the adventure of the scaled codger. Wait. Bert may be old, but he wasn't around in 1927. I think this is the adventure of the veiled lodger. And if I'm wrong, then the fix is in. It's fixed, I tells ya. Well, Eric, you are actually correct this time around. Congratulations. You and many other people will be joining in the drawing here that we're about to do. So let's wheel out the prize wheel and give it a big spin. Watching it go around, and it's slowing down. And it looks like it landed on number 18. Number 18. And that corresponds to, it's Olivia Kirkendall. Olivia, congratulations. We'll be sending something your way from our coffers here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Well, that means that it is this time to get our quiz on with the next canonical couplet. Here we go. Doubly preoccupied when this case had begun, Holmes learns Watson's number when at school was 31. If you know the answer for this episode's canonical couplet, put it in an email addressed to comment@ihearofsherlock.com with canonical couplet in the subject line. If you are among all of the correct answers and we choose you at random, you'll win. Good luck. Well, fantastic, Bert. Can't wait to see what we pull out of the vaults this time. Got plenty of stuff.
How's it going in the vaults?
It's good. Well, it is musty and dusty down here, and occasionally I run into a few cobwebs. And I think I saw Jack Benny down here a while ago, down in the vaults. I was looking for my extra change, he said. No, we thanks to Tony Quattrochi, we have a number of back prizes to get through. So, Tony, thank you for your generosity in sharing some of your collection with us, and we will look forward to adding more people to our recipient list moving forward. Well, I can't believe March is gone. Is it going out like a lamb, Bert? Lambert.
Well, it hasn't been, weather-wise or even, from the standpoint of the state of the world, it hasn't been a particularly perky March, I think it's safe to say.
It has not. It has not. But we will be back in April on the 15th, the middle of the month, with yet another episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. If things go according to plan, we'll be talking with another couple of authors. Stay tuned for that. You never know how these things are going to work out. But we do have a number of great interview guests lined up for this season, our 16th season. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon. If you continue to do that, we do appreciate it. And please, the one thing you can do to help support the show, even if you're not a financial supporter, which is okay, we would simply ask that you tell other people about I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. If you listen to podcasts, if you frequent our site, however you choose to do it, you sharing I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is the best vote of confidence that we could have. So thank you in advance for that. In the meantime, this is the lionized Scott Monty.
And I am the lateral Bert Wolder.
And together, we say... The game's afoot.
The game's afoot.
I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I am neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.